Geez, distributing music is so complicated because there's websites, services, all saying that they can distribute my music, but I don't want to get in trouble and I want to do things the right way. And there's composer royalties, there's distribution, there's licensing, mechanical licenses, derivative works. What about parodies? There's too many things to keep track of. So how about I just go study real quick and I'm going to come back and I'll be supercharged and I'm going to show you all what I've learned. Whoa! Okay, I think I'm super powered enough to show you everything I've learned now. Hopefully, I can do my best attempt at the ultimate one-stop guide to how to get your cover music out into the world legally, correctly, and the best possible way for your money and for your audience. This guide isn't going to be like a real quick video. I can't make this into a YouTube short, but I'm going to make this fun and I'm gonna organize everything for you by chapters, and it won't be boring, I promise. I'll even do some magic. So, why don't you come with me? Let's go somewhere cooler. For those who don't know me, my name is Panuganti, and I've been a musician forever, but I've also been a cover musician for a very long time. And by being on YouTube, I've been able to collaborate and play progressive rock and metal music to my heart's content. And I've also been able to fairly and safely distribute my cover music so I can celebrate my favorite franchises. Covers are great. They put us in the heat of battle and let us be the hero or villain of our favorite stories, but with music. All right, what's a mechanical license? Is it a license to be a mechanic? A license is pretty much just an agreement from the copyright holder of the work that allows you to reproduce said work. What that fancy language means is it's our ticket to covering and selling our cover. So for example, if I wanted to cover the Beatles' Eleanor Rigby, I need a license. But one thing that you might have heard is the word compulsory. Compulsory mechanical licenses are something that you can acquire at Soundrop or any licensing entity that knows how to do mechanical licensing. This is the proper way to get the agreement that you need to cover your music and sell it, make money, and properly, appropriately give royalties to whoever is the copyright holder. Now, you might be wondering why I keep saying all these fancy words like copyright holder. Why can't I just say the person who wrote the dang thing? Well, sometimes they don't own the rights to it. In fact, for all of my friends who cover video game music, you're probably familiar with the fact that a lot of composers had buyout contracts and they may not own the copyright to their music. And therefore, you're basically asking the bigger company, hey, can I cover this game? Is that okay? Do you know what video game music is? While mechanical licenses pretty much can cover it for the majority of people who are covering music quite close to the arrangement, we have to talk about a scary little term called derivative works. It's kind of scary because you're changing the fundamental character of the work. And I just told you not to change the fundamental character of the work. Now I'm saying this thing, fundamental character of work, so much, and this is where we get into the gray area again. I can't tell you exactly what it means to have a fundamental character of a work. This is where people will go into court and decide whether or not something qualifies. And because it's just not worth the risk, very often you will see people get their derivative works rejected. Now, what the heck is a derivative work, and why do I keep bringing it up? You're doing something that's going to significantly alter the work's meaning or original intent in such a way that it would kind of maybe bug the copyright holder. For example, if I wrote a song about, happy ponies and something, and you changed all of the lyrics, even though the melody's the same, to be about, I don't know, sad ponies. This is a bad example, but this could be something that I, as the creator, would not like. So perhaps this is what the original law was written to be as. This is more of a food for thought situation, but I'm trying to tell you exactly what you need to know in the current state of the United States Copyright Code so that you can get your music out there. If you are changing the fundamental character of a song, like, I don't know, maybe if I translated Eleanor Rigby into a different language, or maybe I was playing Star Fox 64, and I thought it was really cool if Slippy had his own soliloquy, and I wrote that based on the Corneria music or something like that, and it became a musical, and then I sold it to Broadway. I'm getting ahead of myself, but that's a derivative work, And I can't just do that without contacting the original composer and asking for explicit permission. This isn't something that's covered by compulsory mechanical licensing, and most distributors will not be able to get that through. Now, when you're working on your cover, your song, or whatever you want to release onto the interwebs, to streaming platforms, to retail, you cannot just put up a derivative work. That's just not the way it's working right now. Of course, in the future, maybe you'll be able to ask permission. Maybe they'll make some sort of website, you can go there, and then you can just hop in and do derivative works and ask for permission that way. But for now, unfortunately, if your music is in this gray area, you're going to have to alter your idea or find a creative solution that works in the confines of the law. Now, before we leave licenses and covers and what's okay and what's not okay, we do have to briefly mention parodies. You might be thinking, oh, Weird Al Yankovic can release parodies and stuff, so why can't I? That's changing lyrics, and unfortunately, I'm going to have to cop out. This is gray area. I can't exactly tell you why this works, why this doesn't work, because I'm not a lawyer. Can't stress that enough. I am just not legally able to give you advice on your particular situation. So I highly recommend that if you are going to go that route, please talk to a music lawyer or someone who is more knowledgeable or experienced in licensing parodies, because while it is protected by the fair use doctrine, it's still something that I imagine would be discussed in court often. If I were a lawyer, then we could just better call Roe. Now that we have the information we need to understand cover licenses and what is okay and what isn't okay and who needs to get paid properly, we can go to a distributor site and they can take care of taking your music, making sure all the information is good, and getting it out into the world, and making sure you and everyone who deserves to be paid gets paid. We're going to use Soundrop. Now that we're on the Soundrop website, you can probably tell what they do, which is, of course, get your music out into the world properly. And when I say properly, I'm emphasizing the care that they take with all of the information tied to your songs and making sure that the right people get paid. When we take our covers to Soundrop, we're basically telling them which composers wrote it, who owns the copyright, and that way, just like we talked about with mechanical licenses, we fulfill our end of the agreement, or rather Soundrop takes care of that for us. Now, licensing isn't quite as easy as just going to Soundrop signing up. We have to share some information that tells Soundrop where your cover came from, who wrote it, who owns the rights to it, maybe what soundtrack it's from, if it's a video game, what video game it's from, what movie it could be from, and that way they have every single bit of information they need to get a mechanical license. And as we walk through the Soundrop process, you're gonna get to see all of this in real time. So in short, what we're doing here at this website is we're taking our music and then we're taking our metadata, which is a very important word I wanna quickly talk about. Metadata is all of the information that's kind of tied to this one entity. So if I take a cover of a song, let's say Song of Storms from Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, the metadata tied to my cover could be me. I'm the artist who covered it. Now it could be Koji Kondo, that's the artist who wrote it. And then we could have things like Ocarina of Time, that's the game it's from, that's the source information. And other things like the song length, the song file itself, and more things like genre pop up. And this is all of the information that's tucked into our one song. It's really, really important to get your metadata ahead of time, or at least have a good idea of what it's going to be. So when we tell Soundrop exactly what our cover is, you're gonna be in good hands and you're gonna get your cover out faster. Now, Soundrop's pipeline in the factory here is to make sure that your audio is proper in terms of quality, format, time requirements. They need to make sure there's no hate speech or anything extraneous about it. And they also need to make sure your album artwork is proper according to their guidelines. Now, you might be wondering, why would Soundrop care about all this? Why restrict it? But this is actually to make sure it works on Apple Music, on Spotify, on all sorts of streaming and retail platforms. There's so many of them with so many different rules that it's important that we just nail it with this one universal guideline that is in the support page so that your music can come out on time and properly. Now again, before you get started and start submitting your music, you're gonna wanna make sure that your music is licensable. There's a lot of great websites, and even though I'm talking to the video game people, this goes for everybody out there. Check that your song came out in the United States, because it's going to United States licensing entities. Soundrop is going to ask you for a specific link to the soundtrack. So any sort of official page that shows that this soundtrack was released in the United States officially is going to be sufficient. You can use things like Easy Songs Database. You could use VGMDB.net if you're covering game music. And you can even use store pages, maybe streaming, as long as it's an official release. Now, you want to be wary of things like Bandcamp if someone has unofficially uploaded a soundtrack that you like. And unfortunately, a lot of older soundtracks, or even soundtracks that were made across the seas, they may not have an official soundtrack. So you've got to double check that before. While you might find other covers or unofficial soundtracks and might wonder to yourself, well, they licensed it, why can't I? It's important to remember that there are other distributors with different approaches, and a cover doesn't necessarily tell that it was safe to license it. It just says that some distributor was able to push that cover through. For that reason, if you're still unable to license a song, it's probably likely that the soundtrack just has not been properly officially released. There's a future out there where I imagine every game gets a beautiful, clean, metadata-rich soundtrack release. But until then, we gotta follow the rules. Now you must be more than ready to release your song, so if you haven't already made a free account, go ahead and make one on Soundrop's website. It's really quick, really simple, and you're gonna have a dashboard made for you where you can upload your music, check your payouts, add information, and important tax information to make sure you get paid. This is the dashboard. It's where you can check out all of the music that you've made so far, as well as important information. It's kind of like the hub of where you can go for finances. You can check out how well your music's doing around the world, different streaming sites and which ones do better or worse. And of course, more importantly, it's where you can release your music. All we have to do is hit this plus, or we can go to the music tab and we can create a new album. Now, some of you might be confused. If you only have one song, why create an album? But every single song you release, or EP, is kind of called an album. Let's take a quick look at some of the things available to us. We can go to My Music, and this is where you can access your recent releases, you can organize, filter it, you can even remove them if you need to change anything for any reason. It's all right in the same tab. You can also check out rights holders, which is where you can see the list of artists that you've ever worked with or released music for. Now, if you hit FAQ, you can go to the support page, and this is where you're gonna find a lot of information tied to specific cases, things that are like unique artist names, or my song is too long, or some of the guidelines we were talking about earlier, so you can make sure your artwork is perfect before it hits the stores. Once you've clicked plus, or you've basically gone to the music page and created a new album, we're basically going to be set up to make a new release. This could be a single, it could be an EP, or it could be a full album, but they're all going to take place in the exact same form. Cover art is kind of tough because I'm not a painter, but I know that a lot of people who are musicians have found different creative ways to make some sort of cover art for their singles and sometimes even their albums. Now, with any free program for art or a paid one, you could take, I don't know, a royalty-free picture that kind of speaks to the song, or you could take your own picture, maybe a still from the music video. There's all sorts of really cool options that I highly recommend. And if you're just in a panic, just look around the room, take your phone, and snap a picture. It's important to remember that your cover art needs to be a square, 1400 by 1400 minimum, but 3000 by 3000 recommended. This way, it'll work for all sorts of different mediums, different stores where your music's gonna be seen. You also don't want to use anything that you don't own the rights to, so obviously no copyrighted imagery, things like that. Now, if you're a fan artist, one of my favorite things to do is subtle references to my source material. It's kind of artistic, kind of cool, and it also makes you stand out from the original material quite nicely. And I think that's the whole point of this. Language. What language are you going to be releasing your song under?
This is basically the primary language of all your metadata. So if your title and artist name are, in example, Japanese, you should put Japanese or Spanish or so on.
Release title. This one may seem obvious, but we're just gonna put the name of the song that we're covering. It's important to watch for all the guidelines that are in the FAQ. And one thing is for sure, you wanna make sure that this is accurate to the song if you're going to be titling it literally what the song was in the game or the source material. When you're releasing something that has more than one source, meaning like a compilation video game album, or maybe you're just doing a bunch of songs from different movies, it's very important to put a from the original source material in the title itself. That said, if you want, you can pick your own title, make something creative, but it's very important to distinguish it from the original song, and that's the whole point of adding the next step, which is version. Title versions is something that is actually very, very important for us cover artists because we need to make sure that no one ever gets confused what's the original song and what's the cover. So if you are releasing a cover, you need to put something in the title version. It can be cover version, but it could also be maybe a genre twist version. As the example shows, if you were covering a Slayer song, but you just covered it as metal, you might be better off saying cover version. But if you did something that wasn't already in that genre and twisted it on its head, like Let It Go from Frozen, but you did it as a death metal cover, then boom, there you go, death metal version. Now, if your version is live, or it's a radio edit, or maybe you made it 5 years ago and now this cover is some sort of upgrade, it's important to denote that in the title version again. Artist, is it a compilation of artists or is it just you? It's important to credit everybody, and there's a lot of different ways you can actually credit artists.
If you're going to be listing 4 or more primary artists tied to different songs, it will be listed under various artists, so we check yes.
If not, then you just need to type in the name of the artist that you're planning on putting in this cover or this release. Information time. This is very important because our album is going to be listed based on this information. Genre. Now, before you freak out, yes, I know there are a lot of genres and maybe you don't vibe with all of them. Maybe you feel like you are heavy metal, but you also have a bit of polka influence. It's important to narrow it down as best as you can so that you can choose the appropriate genres.
For genres, you also want to note if you're a classical player or an orchestral musician and you find yourself wanting to select those genres, it's important to note that these are actually reserved for classical and orchestrated original music. Because the retailers and the streaming sites will list the composer alongside the artist name on your track, these genres can't be used for covers. Same goes for the soundtrack genre. If you're kind of adjacent to these styles, you may want to pick a different subgenre that's more appropriate for you.
For me, as an example, if you're familiar with my music, I consider myself a progressive rock and metal artist. So because these genres aren't necessarily recognized by all the retailers in the world, I like putting heavy metal and prog rock or art rock under mine. P, copyright. This field is a little scarier, but honestly, it's not that bad. It's just the sound recording copyright holder and the year that that copyright was published. So for most people, this is actually just the year you made it and your name or your artist name. Or if you have a legal LLC or some sort of label, you can put that as well. It's the person who owns the copyright of the sound recording itself. Now, cover artists, I know you're thinking, that's not me, right? Because I didn't make it, but you made the cover. So this is just answering who made the cover. And you may not own the copyright to the composition, but you own the right to the sound recording as you submit it through Soundrop. C, copyright is a similar field, but it's talking about the actual product. And what I mean by product is the music and the artwork combined as a product that's going to be streamed and retailed. Once again, I'm just gonna put in the year that I made this cover and my name, but you need to make sure that your case applies in case you're in a band or a label or have some other circumstance. Now, many of you watching have previously released your music, maybe on a different distributor, and now you're choosing Soundrop, but it doesn't have to be some crazy mess to migrate over. All we need to do is hit previously released, and then we just need to provide the release date and the UPC or EAN. Now, those weird acronyms, all they're just saying is the unique product number or identifier that says that this song belongs to you and came out this time and it's tied to this master. So we're taking that crazy little cluster of information and we're telling them exactly what it was. So when we release through Soundrop, they can match some of the statistics depending on the circumstance. Of course, you also have the chance to include a record label in case you belong to one and want to release under that title. Tracks. This is the fun part because this is when we actually give our music to Soundrop and we make sure that we have all the information tied to it. Let's go through it. Now this is where we literally take our WAV file and give it to Soundrop. So you're gonna wanna make sure that you follow the basic guidelines, but there's more information in case you need it on the support page. Upload your file and you're gonna be able to provide more information below regarding things like your lyrics, language of lyrics if you sang on it. Of course, many of you are instrumentalists, and don't worry, we just have to pick instrumental here. If you're not sure where your language falls, you can always default to Latin right now, and hopefully in the future, different retailers and streaming sites will recognize my made-up language. It's also important to put the same exact track title and title version if you're releasing a single next, but otherwise you can just title it however you want that release to be. If you're making an album, of course, this is probably important to just put the actual song title here instead of the album title in the beginning under main info. Now, of course, is the most important thing in all of music, crediting. You can say who is the primary artist or artists. These are the people that'll be under the artist column when you listen to this song on retailers. You could also include different kind of key artists like features, or if it were more classical, you can pick those kind of roles as well. Now, if you already have an ISRC code, which again is just a unique identifying kind of code, then you can put that here. For those of you who've registered your covers or have registered your copyrighted music, this might be something that's applicable to you, and it just helps connect everything together. Explicit lyrics. This is where you can tell Soundrop if your song or songs contain any inappropriate content. Now, I wish I could just tell you a list of all the bad words that you can't put in your song without marking explicit lyrics, because I know a ton of bad words like You're basically required to mark explicit lyrics every time it is not appropriate for children if you have references to violence or abuse or criminal behavior. If you're unsure, just do your research, use your best judgment. It's never a bad thing to mark explicit lyrics. For some people, it's kind of cool. Now we're going to explore branching paths. This is basically where we can tell Soundrop our song is an original song that you wrote or you are publishing for the songwriter, a cover song, or public domain. Let's talk about each of them. If we choose original music, that means that we're going to need to share the composers, songwriters, lyricists, and all the credits necessary so that we know exactly who wrote the song and who to credit. Now, if we do a cover song, we're actually going to do something similar, but we're telling them the composer, where it's from, and all the information necessary to get a mechanical license. It'll also let Soundrop know that they need to take royalties that are owed for the composer or the copyright holder. Now, if you choose something like public domain, this might be some of the old music that are basically in public domain now. Even a lot of popular holiday music is public domain, but we still have to include that information just to be sure. Automated claiming. This one's a little bit new, but we basically are allowed to do this for almost all sorts of music, and you'll find this on social media sites where you're creating story type content and you want to quickly pick some sort of music to play on loop or to play in the background. This is a different and kind of new territory, so there are some exceptions you've got to note. We aren't eligible for automated claiming if it's an original video game soundtrack, or if it's a public domain composition, or if it's some sort of royalty-free beat, loop, or similar. This is important to note because this is a very new area of music, and royalties tied to it may not be quite set up yet. Advanced info is great for track-specific things. Like if you wanted to change the genre of a certain track, but keep some of the other songs on the album a different genre. For example, if you have an acoustic song on a metal album, it could stand out if you set the genre properly so that the acoustic song is maybe appropriately found and put into different playlists than the rest of the album. You can also choose the time at which your song is going to start playing for previews. So maybe you have a really sweet guitar solo that you think will sell people on the song. You could start it there instead of at the very beginning by default. Lastly, you have an optional lyrics space. So if you wrote lyrics to your song or there are existing lyrics to your cover, you can include them here.
Now, as an alternative, I recommend you use Music Match. They're partnered up with Soundrop, and you can use them to synchronize your lyrics to things like Instagram stories, Spotify, Apple Music, or Amazon Music. Definitely check this out if your music has lyrics, because this is packed with features.
Now let's talk about how to actually get the mechanical license. Once you are certain that your song is licensable, you'll probably have gone through this process and you'll come to this publishing page where we can tell Soundrop exactly what this song you're covering is, who made it, who owns the copyright to it, what it's for, and make sure that they have all the information they need so that they can go acquire a license for us. We have fields such as original composition, song title. This is what the song is officially listed as under the soundtrack that you've used as a reference for your cover. We also have original recording artist. Now this is usually the composer in the game industry, but often we have different performers, guest soloists, and it's important to note that the recording artist may not be the composer every single time, or it may include other artists as well. Then we have original authors, which can be the composer or composers if there were multiple. We also have ISWC if you can find it for the soundtrack. This is just another identifying code that'll help narrow down exactly what song you are covering. There's source album title. This is extremely important for cover artists because we're gonna say exactly what album has the song that we're covering. This way they can make a proper compulsory mechanical licensing request. You can also give the source title for the media. So let's say we're covering Donkey Kong 64 or GoldenEye 007 or any game. We can give that game title here, and if there's some sort of precedent for this game being covered, then Soundrop can actually look and find it a little bit faster. All this information is in the betterment of optimizing our process, right? Last but not least, you absolutely must link a US audio-only release of the album that you're trying to cover a song off. Otherwise, it's going to be impossible for them to know that this song was officially released in the US. And how else are we going to be able to give royalties to the composer or the copyright holder that they are obviously owed? This could be a Wikipedia page of the soundtrack, it could be a store page, it could be a streaming site, as long as it's an official stream and an official upload by the proper copyright holder. Now, I know a lot of people are thinking audio only, maybe I can include YouTube links, but unfortunately, this is not a guaranteed way of showing that this was an official upload. So you'll want to use an audio only source like a streaming site or some of the ones I've mentioned. Last, we can also include a few notes to help identify it. So I like to include the track number on the soundtrack and save some time. One of the other very, very important steps in releasing your music is revenue splits. A lot of people watching this are collaborators and need a way to make sure that everyone gets paid exactly what they agreed upon. In the revenue splits page, we can just say 100% if it's all going to you, or we could add any email and we could split it. That way everyone who worked on the album gets a little cut. Now, when you put in the name and the email, it's gonna go to that person, and that way they can get invited to create a Soundrop account or sign into their existing one. And that way they can check out their own statistics, their revenue splits, and of course, they'll get paid. Finally, we're done. We learned about licenses. We learned about how to make cover art and metadata and derivative works and all these crazy terms, and finally we're at the end so we can release the album. You can take a listen and play back your song, make sure everything is in order, and then we can approve. There's all sorts of really good choices in how to release a cover or a song in general, but what we can do now is we can set a date for when we want our release to come out, and we can plan ahead. We can even take advantage of pre-release tools so people could pre-order it on their favorite retailers, or we could just drop it whenever we feel like it. It's obviously very important to note that distribution takes a long time. There are unpredictable changes to the dozens of retailers and streaming sites that we use to play our music. So you should probably try to plan all of your releases at least a month ahead. If not, you could maybe expect a 2-week turnaround, but it'll just depend because, of course, cover licensing is very complicated. It's going to vary distributor to distributor, season to season, so be patient and do your best and plan ahead. Once you're happy with the timing of your release, we can pick any of these stores or all of these stores and retailers and streaming services to release our music to, and all of them will get our music once the distribution and the licensing process is done. Once we're done, we just have to pay 99 cents per song and we can get our music out into the world. It's pretty cool because as a cover musician, all I had to do was be inspired by a song, record my cover of it, and then go to this website and tell them who made it. Honestly, it's just as simple as those 3 steps. And once we've talked about it and shared the power, shared the knowledge, I don't think it's that scary, do you? It's important to note that once we've sent our music out, it'll take actually 2 months for the most popular streaming services to pay out and provide any information. So while you keep making your music, hopefully you're learning a little bit about your process, getting better, improving your Soundrop experience, and hopefully when you cover music, you now know exactly what you need to provide going in, so you can have a really fast experience and just get your music out into the world. I know this video can't possibly answer every question, and it can't go into specific scenarios or specific questions. That's what Soundrop is for. They have good support that I've trusted for 5 years. They have live chat and automatic chat for quick questions. And of course, there's a community that's built around all the Soundrop musicians and artists that are all part of this great ecosystem of digital musicians. And in this age, all we have to do is just leave a comment. tag me on Twitter. Ask me if you have any questions. Ask Soundrop if you have any questions. This is something that people used to not be able to do from home. Recording studios were super expensive, and now I can just go to my computer, plug in a guitar, and start making music that I'm proud of. And the best part is I can share it with this process. And especially when it comes to covers, when it comes to celebrating our favorite series or franchises, maybe even joining it one day, this is one of the most important processes to understand. If you have more questions, you can always reach out on social media or even leave a comment and I'll do my best to answer it. But you can also ask your favorite distributors and they might have the answer. For me, I'm going to Soundrop.